We were told that you are the only person to run a kayak down the Colorado River through Glen Canyon before the Glen Canyon Dam was built. Is that true?
That is true to my knowledge. Glen Canyon's under BLM's auspices, and uh, a guy wrote a book. I think it's Glen Canyon, the uh, canyon nobody knew. And in his book, I met him. I was acquainted with him, but I never saw him after he got the book. It has the statement that my kayak is the only kayak that BLM has on record of going through. Whether people went through, they don't have on record. I don't know.
What year was that?
19, I'm going to. God, I wish I knew. I wish I knew. 1960. I found a
How
sheet
old
of.
were you?
Too old. I was in my 30s already, I think. I was teaching in Canada, and what it came about was I got this. It was the end of the school year, basically, and I got this telegram saying, "We're running Glen Canyon. If you want to join us, well, we've got a permit for such and such a day, and you're welcome." Well, as it was, I finished up in Canada. I had my little Volkswagen all loaded and hopped in it. And I think I drove nonstop from Redway, Alberta, Canada down to here to get on there. And then they said, but we need you to take the recovery vehicle to the bottom where we're getting out of the river because you go with all this gear on a pickup or two and you float down the river and there's all your transportation. So um, would you take that? Well, I was pretty tired and I said, sure. And I took the recovery vehicle down there. And then I was going to hitchhike from Page up around to Green River, um, to Height or White Crossing, or up to where probably, I don't know, the town, and then we would drive into the river and I'd get a ride into the river. And we did that. And oh, it was just one of those things. We ran it. We all piled in um, the vehicle, loaded it up, and drove up there. But to get from, oh, we had to have two people. My brother and I flew. We flew from where we got out of the river to where our vehicles were up there to drive them in and meet at Monticello with the rest of the group. We got in this airplane. We were tooling across there, and the story the Indians have is that the river was caused by a giant lizard, and that's where its tail drug. And whether that is truth or not, but I will bet it is. But I heard it from a couple of Indians. That's their what they've been taught for a million years. We got in, but we were going across these uh, horribly beautiful canyon walls, rumbly kind of rumble, and then just little slit like this. Some of them 700, 800 feet deep, and there is a picture down in Arizona or Utah. One guy thought he could jump across one with his pickup, and he tried, and the pickup is up there at the very top, just wedged between the walls. he didn't make it. But anyway, uh, going over these things, and the guy said, we have reports, that, and this was a pilot of our plane, that there are 7 planes wrecked in this maze out here that we've never been able to find. And we're up there, and we get up there, and when we got to White, the wind was going horribly, and my brother and I wondered, why are we taking off now when we left down at Page? He said, he's not going to be able to land in that wind. And we circled, and we circled, and we circled, and we circled, and he'd get within, this is an estimate, 1,000 feet from ground. And one time, my exposure meter actually came out of my shirt pocket, came up, hit me under here, and my nose gave me a bloody nose. Boom! And now you're beginning to think, should I've gotten burial insurance? Hell, they'll never find my body. But anyway, he says, I'm running out of fuel, guys. And he said, I got a friend at Roosevelt who had to put his plane down a week or so ago, and he always has fuel. I can get some from him. We flew into Roosevelt, and the government has a landing strip there, but it's for a weather station. We lit there, and the guns weren't drawn, but came out there under quite a bit of security and told to get the hell out of there. This is a government landing strip. Well, he still had got enough fuel to get into town. And we zipped like this, got in town, then we had to walk about 4 or 5 miles. No, it wasn't that far. A couple, 3 miles into town, and we got we lit where his thing was. I don't know. We got fuel anyway, and had to walk back out to the airport. And but the road did a turn absolutely like that, and there were tall trees on both sides of it. It came up here. It didn't even go on. It was just a right angle turn, and we got enough fuel to get us in town. Then we lit on the airport and drove down this paved road like this into this guy's fuel tanks and filled up. And it would have made a classic movie. I didn't take my camera with me though when we flew back, and he was explaining all these things about but we filled up and we were driving down, and you couldn't see around the corner, and he asked me if I'd walk around the corner and flag anybody down because the plane was taking the full width of the road. Sure. So walked around the corner, and here came a car full of the drunkest Indians you've ever seen, about probably 6 or 7 of them in a standard sedan. And I stopped, waved them down. Oh, sir, white man. They didn't say that. But I said, well, I'd like you to just stay here, but pull over to the side of the road. There's an airplane coming around the corner. And they roared with laughter. And about then the plane came around the corner. The driver's eyes got this big, and I'm certain he thought it was flying 180 miles an hour. He threw it in gear and off into a drain ditch that was probably 6 foot deep. But we had fuel, so we could get where we wanted to go and this and that. But, the whole trip was just a riot of fun. That was totally the comedy of the trip. But when this guy he wasn't, and we finally, because we had been there and done that at noon, I don't know if it was my brother or I, said, well, how are you going to put the plane down? Oh, there's a strip at height. Height and White are the same. It's the town of White and it's White Crossing, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, he said, um, I'll just land on the strip. And you guys would have had to walk maybe a mile or two to get to our pickup. But anyway, he said, well, you know, the wind came up, and he didn't know it. And he was running tourist flights. But he had never been that far up. He would go in the mazes down there, and at height it kind of gets less dramatic, so they would turn around before that. And got there, and he said, I'm running out of fuel. And he said, my friend won't care. He put his down a week ago. It's in the Roosevelt River, which was right on our path. And we flew over, and sure as we were a couple 300 feet in the air, there's this guy's plane sitting perfectly good in the water in the middle of the river. You know, a fiction writer could never come up with a better story. And everything I've told you is absolute truth. But he said, I'll know better next time. But
So then, how long did it take you before you actually got onto the water?
well, see, we had been down and we were going up to get our put-in vehicles. So it was just a matter of drive into, I think it was Monticello, because I had taken one pickup down to Page, or Crossing of the Fathers, that area there, taken one that we could put all of our rafts and gear and everything on. And I was the only, my brother and I flew with this guy, but there was my brother-in-law, my sister, my mother, what was the other guy's name? He drowned in Hawaii. Bob something. Mike Colville. I think that's all of them. And they were just waiting in Moab for us to get there with the pickup before we could get everything home.
You can ask.
What? I don't know.
How many miles did you kayak?
You would have to really check this out. It was from Height to the Crossing of the Fathers, or Hole in the Rock, something down there. And I'm mixed up whether it was 185 miles or 135 miles. But I'm pretty certain it was one or the other of those.
And how long did that take?
I think we took 7 days. I mean, it was just a trip. And the river was wonderful, but we didn't just run it. We would, some days, well, there was one day we only made a half a mile on the river between campsite to campsite. We saw a canyon we wanted to explore, so we stopped and spent a full day or day and a half exploring the canyon, and you get on, and the next time you might go 15 miles or 20 miles. You know, if you can find a map of the Grand Canyon, which shouldn't be hard to find, Lake Powell, I think it's been 50 years since I've seen the CD practically, but I think I identified where every one of our campsites were by the canyon. We would go from Canyon A to Canyon B. I'm afraid of heights. God, I'm afraid of heights.
A climber who's afraid of heights.
Yeah. Not if I'm on a rope and climbing,
Mm-hmm.
but for me to walk up to something and even a 4 or 5 foot height, I hate jumping off of it. Well, there's one on there, and we just bumped in some way or other as we were getting there. A Boy Scout troop, maybe Monticello or somewhere like that. And he said, "Oh, be sure and go up such and such a canyon." Why? "Oh, there's this wonderful pool you can jump into." Well, you see those cottonwoods over there? They'd reached 3/4 the way of up to where you jumped off, and you could jump in right into the pool. I didn't do that, but I have movies. You'll see my cousin Alvin, he's the one that organized it. He's like that going, and then all of a sudden, but it was, and we got in these canyons, and they had never been explored adequately. We'd go in there, and there'd be Indian pots just sitting around and stuff, and there was one crib that had corn husks in it, but all the corn was gone off of it. It was made out of willows. It was 6 foot in diameter, and came up and had a lid on it. And I think it might have been plastered at one time on the inside with mud, but it was to keep the animals out of it and things like that. And I was so mad at myself because it had a round opening about like this. It had a lid. I put the lid up and leaned like that, and I broke 2 or 3 pieces of willow. And I regretted that. Well, in essence, it doesn't make as much difference now because that would be under 130, 140 water. But I just could not see myself hurting that thing. And BLM told us when we went in, anything you see you want, you take. That isn't BLM. That They said, we know it's all going to be underwater and never seen again. And they told us, and they said that even includes if you see a skeleton and want it, you bring it out. And we didn't, of course, see any grave sites that we knew what were. But they knew it was all going to be desecrated. Gaskell is the guy that wrote the book, I think, that has that my kayak's the only one BLM has on record on it.
What was it again?
Gaskell.
Gaskell?
Do you still have the kayak today that you...
I'll get it. You two discuss this amongst yourselves. My neighbor decided to burn his weeds. And if you can visualize these 13 feet apart, that was my kayak. That's my kayak. It was 13 feet long, and I know that isn't accurate.
And what was its name?
I had a pile of 2x4s here, and I was running days ago. I was taking it out on the river, and I had just put it on top of there to run. We burned all the 2x4s. This is all I was able to salvage of
So tell me, what happened to it? How did it?
They were burning trash, and it came across here and burned me out practically. Tool sheds, lumber supply, everything.
And your kayak was whole before that?
And it had been on the water a week or two before that. The the history on it. God, I'm glad you're doing this. Nobody knows about my kayak except me.
Do we want to sit down again?
Sure. I was teaching school at Redway, Alberta, Canada, which is about 90 miles northeast of Edmonton. And I'm teaching algebra, biology, chemistry, um, and the shop program, and the curling coach. And what do you do on a winter night when you have 5 or 6 hours of daylight max? You build a dang kayak. And I got the plywood on it is all the best of marine grade plywood. That's the little funky pieces. The strips are, I went into Edmonton and told them what I was doing, and they said, there's our mahogany, you take whatever boards you want. And that was the clearest boards of mahogany I ever saw. There wasn't even a little ripple in them. They were hand selected. All of the screws were copper. I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never seen a kayak. And all the screws were copper, and all of the staples, because I pulled the fabric was airplane that they do on the wooden airplanes. And the paint on it was airplane dope. I figured, and I didn't, nobody told me what to do. These were just things that I came up with myself, thinking probably this was pretty good selection. And there was another guy up there and myself. There's four of us. We ran the North Saskatchewan River from the Columbia ice fields. We were going into Edmonton, but at Drayton Valley we were in the most horrible rain hailstorm you could ever dream, and that was 135 or 185 miles we'd been in constant rain and hail. And when we got to where we could get on a road and get out of there, we were on the road once. One road crossed it, and we happened to be in a good weather thing, so we decided to go on. But we got out at Drayton Valley and called their wives and said, "Come get us." So, but it's had some on the North Saskatchewan River. It's had some on the Athabasca River, some on the Columbia, some on the Bitterroot. What's the river in Yellowstone? It had some on
The
that.
Snake.
And then I've had it out on the coast in Oregon and Washington, and of course it's done some on the river here.
What year did you build it?
I graduated in 1950. I went in the Army 51, 52, because 52, 53. I'm going to say, I wish I'd saved it. I just found the sheet the other day. It had it on there. Probably, if I knew when I got married, that would help. In the late 50s or early 60s, can we put that on there? That's a pretty accurate thing.
About how long did it take you to build until you were very happy with it?
3 or 4 days. In fact, I did mine, and I was doing little streams that were not 10, 12, 15 feet wide is all we had close to there, or the North Saskatchewan River was from here to, it was probably 200 yards wide, but it was flat. I was playing with those, and people saw me, and I ended up building 3 others because people ordered them. And I said, I don't have a plan, and I don't know if mine's right or not. I said, I like it. I said, we want ones just like yours. And so, but you know, it was in the school shop, and the county superintendent says, yeah, you go ahead and build all you can. But so I got to be known as the kayak man, and I was at where a bunch of kayaks were one time, and I said, I call mine a kayak, but I had never seen a kayak before I built it. And I said, I don't really know what a kayak looks like. And one of them says, you've got a umiak. That's the Eskimo type kayak more than an American type kayak. But, you know, I don't think the whole thing weighed over 40 pounds. I could throw it on top of my Volkswagen. In fact, I built one that was 3 feet longer than that I was wanting to do some long rivers, and I wanted more haul space. And
How long ago did this burn?
pardon?
How long ago did this burn? Did this disaster happen for your neighbor?
40 years ago.
Oh, it was that long ago, yeah.
And I don't know why I didn't ever build another one, because for one thing, in Colorado, I couldn't have gotten the quality of lumber I got up there. The fabric, I could go out here at the airport and order the fabric and everything, but they have the best grade of plywood that, like Paxton's or some of those handle in Denver, isn't as good as this. Every knot hole in this throughout, I think it was 7 sheets, every knot hole is patched if there was a knot in it, patched, where ordinarily they just throw, and just the top one has a patch on it. But I think it's overkill. I don't think it really would have mattered. It's not going to rot for years. But I use staples to attach the fabric, and staples to attach the fabric. But see, these are Canadian screws, and they are just getting them in the States now. They were square-headed, and that's all you could buy in Canada. And these are all copper. I didn't staple along here. All I stapled was down this strip, and the main one went, and I just made up the design and made it. And
What did you say you named it?
Pivnichna means northern in Ukrainian. See, I was in a Ukrainian community. Rusalka, and Rusalka, you could look at it and not even know how to pronounce it, is a Ukrainian water witch. And her job, if you and I, or you and him and I am out there, her job is to trip the one that shouldn't be here, so she would trip your husband and leave us all alone. sorry about that. Not really. But she's my kind of witch.
Say the name one more time.
Pivnichna. It like this. It's pi. BV is N is backwards. I C H N A. Pivnichna, that's northern. Rusalka, see, this was P. Rusalka, I forget how they even make the R. I'm going to just put an R here. U and S. The S is backward. The A, so K A. That's basically it. Pivnichna Rusalka. And this is northern, and Rusalka is a fairy tale water witch that if three people are walking along a stream, you know, a guy and two girls, she would trip one of the girls, I assume, and have her get embarrassed and leave the other two alone, or vice versa. If it's two guys and a gal, she'd trip a guy and make him fall in the water and get wet, and he'd be embarrassed and leave the others alone. And that, I, how, if you're in a Ukrainian community, can you come up with an absolutely more perfect name for your love? But John Small was a fellow teacher, and he was Ukrainian, and he was the one that told me. He said, you ought to call it Pivnichna Ruslavka. And it's a U, Ruslavka. I probably don't even pronounce it right, but isn't that a perfect name? And it was written on the top. And I kayaked around people or not around people, but what the heck is that? You know? Yeah. I'm glad you're doing this because this is probably the greatest. Nobody has ever written anything up or anything about it or recorded me or anything about it. But I was I did the Bow River that runs from Lake Louise down to Banff, and I had been down there, and then there's the Bow Falls there, and I was going to do the Bow Falls. And I had done the river and got there, and I thought I'm going to reconnoiter the falls first. I had looked at them several times, and I went over there and took one look at them. I thought, no way. So I didn't do them. They would have been the most difficult, most dangerous water that I would have ever gone on with. But I just said, I want to do more rivers. I don't want to just leave a legacy of drowning in the falls or losing the kayak, even both, because I always wore a life jacket unless I knew the river. If I knew the river, I didn't sometimes. But,
What is your did you ever have an experience where you didn't think you were going to make it
no,
out of the water?
no, I knew I wasn't going to make it right side up, but there's a difference between right side up and never making it. There's a difference. I knew a time or two that I'm going to do this, and sometimes I'd make it and sometimes I wouldn't, but usually I was right. If I thought I wasn't going to make it right side up, well, I came out, swam downstream, and caught my kayak. But and it was an open pit thing, so it couldn't do a like Eskimo rolls or anything. The pit on it was long enough I could sit two adults in it easily, uh, and I could carry enough food by packing it in there for probably about 2 to 2.5 weeks.
Did you have any other questions?
Are you aware that there's a push these days to tear down the Glen Canyon Dam?
It will never do any good.
Don't think it'll do any good?
Oh, yes, it would do good.
Oh, I see. But they won't do it? Is that what you're
Well,
saying?
no. See, that canyon, people think of the water and they think of the walls. What they don't take into consideration, millions of years, the sand buildups, the islands, the flora and fauna, the deer, the elk, the mountain sheep, the rattlesnakes, the lizards. It, I would be in favor of it, but we aren't going to be around a million years from now, you and I, and maybe not even our hereafters. I was just reading a thing about, see, it's in a low spot now. They're not having enough water. And I was reading something about that, the beauty of it, the sand coming back. But the trees that were in it were tamarisk or tamarack. I'm not certain which. I think it's tamarisk. Russian olive, I think, is also goes by. They're a horrible trash tree, but they were most beautiful horrible trash tree there. And a trash tree there is here is not necessarily a trash tree there. And I had one thing that I should have gone back and got my movie camera and tried to record, but it would have been probably a half-mile hike out and then a half-mile hike back in to see one frog. This thing, and I believe what happened to it, because there were a lot of deer and mountain sheep, I think a deer or mountain sheep stepped on its face, took its eyes off, and the nose, everything. It was all healed over perfectly good. The only thing was there would be groups of maybe 50 or 100 frogs, and they'd jump when it came. It was walking like this. I had, when you do something like this, you do it for yourself. And I had nothing else to do, so I just got up on the bank and started watching it. Other frogs were catching insects and grasshoppers coming over, feeding that little rascal. And it was just as plump and healthy looking as any of them, except the fact that it didn't have a nose or the eyes. And those other frogs were actually feeding it. And there isn't a biologist or anybody that doesn't think maybe I'm stretching the truth, but I'm not. I've never heard of anything as compassionate. I believe Mother Nature is the it thing, but actually feeding it and how it lost its face, I could say, I have no idea, but I can see I saw deer boom, 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 through herds of them and realized this is a very easy way that it could have happened.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting story. I like that.
I I wish I had taken my camera with me then, but I figured a half-mile out, walk out probably to the kayak, pick up my camera, and walk back up there. That group of frogs would be in the water or dispersed. Wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
And another one I didn't get, Rainbow Bridge. Have you been
That's
down?
not since the dam, but that's one of the most famous photographs in the world is
I
Rainbow
know.
Bridge before the dam.
I
Right?
don't have it.
Oh. Oh.
I shot both film and movie, and they had what uh, just call it Tin Cup Spring. Do you know what Tin Cup Spring is?
Mm-hmm.
I set my cameras down there and took my drink and sat there for a while and took another drink and hydrated myself pretty well. Went up to, oh darn, my cameras are down at Tin Cup Spring, which is what it's got to be a mile and a half, 2 miles away. I wasn't going to go back and get my cameras for something that everybody on earth that goes there takes a picture of. I do have a picture of it from when we flew over it. But dang.
What did you think about that area down there?
What do I think?
What did you feel? What did you
Can I be kind of gross? If And I do have suicidal thoughts quite often. If I ever did it, don't tell my wife to go hunting for me down there because I don't want to be disturbed. I'm not going to go do it. But my mother bought a plot for me here. I would much rather just be taken up there and dropped in a crevasse somewhere and let some creatures nibble on me and things like that. And that whole Arizona, Utah area down there. You've been there apparently.
Many times.
How do you feel about it?
It's sacred to me.
Yeah. I hate to see it defiled. I hate it with a passion to see the dam built. And one reason I can tell you this about the vegetation is, see, they had two 40-foot holes drilled that was supposed to carry that runoff, that spring, and they couldn't hold it. And the water went up into the vegetation 13 miles above where the dam was. In the last 13 miles we went there, and here's all the trees that had been in sand leaning over. There's trash everywhere from trees, Now that's going to rot, but the sand was washed into the bottom of the thing, and it's just barren rock. There's no vegetation. There are no deer. There are no bighorns. There are no lizards. There was no snakes. It was just, man isn't as important as he thinks he is. I think I got somebody that believes the way I believe, both of you.
Very much so. That's why we're here.
I just think that would be an ideal thing to be. I can see why people go to the desert and walk out there and just disappear. I honestly can. Whether they do it on purpose or whether it is a mistake, I think whatever's left are more at ease there than being in something with a granite headstone that came from Vermont with their name on it and the date of birth and death. It's kind of I don't know if she believes as much as I do. I think she can see where we're coming from, but uh, you know, people think I'm crazy. I don't think I'm crazy. I know I'm crazy. But
Alex, this has been tremendous. I can't tell you how much this means to us.
it's